Perfect. So I'd like to officially welcome everybody. For those of you who don't know me yet, my name's Nathalie Mayotte. I own a company called Master Your Authentic Voice, and by trade, I'm a speaking coach, but since I've been in the DR almost 12 months, I've kind of reinvented myself, and I'm also a relocation concierge. So my job is to help people like yourselves really transition down to the DR in a smooth, and I like to say have peace of mind when you come down, because it is a big transition, and especially when it comes to our kids and education, and we want the best for them. We want to find the right choice and the right fit for your family. So this is not about me tonight. It's really about you guys and what you're looking for, the questions you have for Sean. Please put them into the chat. I will field them and out to Sean so he can focus on answering the questions and telling you all the things that you want to know. So Sean and I met almost 10 months ago when we visited ISLA for the first time. And of course, we're a little bit impartial. We fell in love with it. And our daughter's been going there since May of 2021 and has had I was just telling Sean before we started, some incredible opportunities. She was actually chosen to be a TED Talk speaker in the first unit last year in October. So it was quite an honor as a parent to watch that, but actually mind-blowing, because I was like, this doesn't happen in Montreal, where we're from. Like, I don't think I would have expected something like that. So Sean is the founder and the director at ISLA, and he leads a great team of teachers and assistants. And Sean, I think what I'd love to, maybe you could share first, is the mission and the vision of the school with the parents that are here with us tonight. And then we can take it from there. So there's no like agenda, but really let's get the questions out so we can answer them. Okay, Sean, it's all you.
Great. Thank you, Nathalie. Yeah, I'm Sean. So, I mean, I would say first and foremost that ISLA is focused on having students love to learn. That's our number one mission. We have classes that are mixed grades, mixed cultures, mixed languages, and in part because of that, but we created that. We have this understanding that there's not some level that a kid is supposed to be at. You walk into a classroom and there are 15 students. There are 15 unique individuals, and our goal is to help each one of those children find their own path. We focus on skills rather than content, though you can't teach skills without content. So our goal there is, again, to make sure that when kids leave each of the 6-week units that we do, that they enjoy their experience. We have this crazy notion that if you enjoy school, you'd be much more willing to take on challenges and push yourself. Our campus is 7 years old at this point. We'll be going into the 8th year next year. We have 2 campuses, one in Cabarete, right in between Cabarete and Sosua, in case you're looking at both places. And then one in Las Terrenas. And I don't know if Nathalie, if you're pushing people towards Las Terrenas at all, but it's also a great.
I've only heard great things of Las Terrenas too. It's just a different area.
Yeah, it's a great town. It's if you enjoy a real diverse community, like kind of surf town feel that Cabarete and Sosua have, then Las Terrenas is quite similar. We have students from over 35 countries in our school. We have students from 2 years old is when we start accepting them, all the way up through high school seniors. And we have approximately 145 students in the Cabarete campus right now, and approximately 80 students or so in the Las Terrenas campus. It's only in its 3rd year. Prior to opening these 2 schools, I came here and was part of a founding group of administrators for a program called Liceo Científico. And that is the Dominican Republic's only gifted and talented public school. And it's located in a really small town east of Santiago. That school is now the top public school in the country. And it's the only school that's a public institution here that's doing things like project-based learning, or even has an admissions process. Prior to that, I was a director of a primary school in Tanzania. I taught in Vietnam at a university and an American international school there. I taught in South Korea. And then before that, I'm from the States, I'm from Georgia. I was a youth and family counselor in the Athens, Georgia, Atlanta, Georgia area near the University of Georgia. I graduated from University of Georgia and it was a degree in early childhood. I have 4 children of my own. They range from 7 to 12. And it's kind of unique about ISLA. I'd say a lot of our professors also have their kids there, including Nathalie now, who's been coming in about once a week lately to do these public speaking courses. But a lot of our staff have multiple children in the school, which creates this big, nice family feel. 7 years ago, when we were about to start this school, I had very limited funds. And I was a teacher, prior to that. So I was seeking properties, and I spent a couple years looking for the right property in the DR. And I kept coming with 2 issues. One, I didn't have the money to build on some place. So I needed to find a place that would function as a school right when you walked in. But most places that had large classroom type settings had no green space whatsoever. And I just knew that wasn't something that I was looking for. Most of the places that had large green spaces were homes with tiny bedrooms. And so I started to shift our goal. What we would do and maybe open up a primary school, maybe a kindergarten or so, have a couple of years there and just regroup after we started up. And but that didn't happen. And in fact, because I needed more students than would fill a kindergarten, I went around the community of Cabarete and Sosua and sought out students who were homeschooling. And I don't know if any of you can relate to like homeschooling in the last couple of years, but I can tell you at that point 7 years ago, most of the families that were homeschooling in this area were not necessarily doing it because they wanted to homeschool. It wasn't, you do have families that are really into it and that have a unique perspective on education, but that was not the case. A lot of them were doing it for lack of a better option, maybe lack of funds, but it wasn't the same type of reason that someone maybe in Georgia might do it. There's a lot of people in Georgia who'll do it for religious reasons and other things like that. So I invited all these kids and I said, anyone could come, you can come up here and do your own thing and I'm here to help you out. But when they got there, they didn't want that. I thought they would come up and just kind of do their own individual homeschool program. But they really wanted a family-like experience, and it became this one-room schoolhouse feel. I had this house. That's what our school is. It is a house. It is you could call it a villa or it's a big house, big, beautiful house. But it's, at first I was a bit like apprehensive about putting kids in a house. It didn't feel like a school. We had all these different grade levels and all these things. And then eventually we just began to embrace the fact that there are kids of different ages. It feels like a family-like environment. And in fact, we're in a home. So we're just going to continue to focus on making it feel like a home. One of the things I learned at our school in Salcedo, which is the public school, is the importance of having students be a part of building the school culture, building the school agreements, rules, the art, the furniture, and all of that. And so over the last 7 years, everything that you see on our campus was built there. We don't have any plastic chairs. We don't have any imported IKEA shelves. We didn't hire any artists to come in and paint. We literally did it all. The kids saw it happen. They participated in it, and it creates this sort of feel like the students are owners of that. As we got all of these various grade levels together, these various kids, to be honest, I had to figure out what to do. It's not as though when we started ISLA, I had this very clear idea about how it would actually work. But so we got these kids in there and we had students from 7 years old to 16 years old in the same class. And it became very clear to me that there was no way for me to stand in front of the room and teach students any type of content, because it just didn't make sense to speak to 7 to 9 to 15. They had very different understandings of this type of content. So instead, I focused on teaching them how to teach themselves. And it turned out that even if you were 16 or 6, you didn't know that much. To introduce a way to study vocabulary, to introduce an app on a computer that you can use to practice the language, to introduce a way to work on public speaking or debate, to introduce a creative way to present your work in the form of art. Every kid was kind of right at the beginning, and then once they got the option and the ability to kind of choose their own direction as it related to the content of the unit, that freed me up to do what I think is the only real teaching that you can do, which is kind of like ability-based, one-on-one, individual, right where the kid's at, right where they need to be. So I spent most of my day, instead of standing in front of the classroom there, bouncing around to each kid as much or as little as they needed, helping them guide their own discovery of the learning. That ultimately led to this halfway through that, or near the end of that first year, we had about 22, 24 kids of all these different ages. And so when people began signing up for the next year, if you had asked me, well, how many 4th graders do you have, or how many 8th graders you have, I didn't have to answer that question in the same way that a traditional school would have to answer that. Typically, if you're moving to a small town and you see a small school, you're concerned if there's only 3 kids in 4th grade. What's that going to feel like for my kid? But we weren't placing kids in grades. We were grouping them on numbers. So we were going to have between 8 and 15 kids, whether it was 4 grades or 2 grades or 1 grade. And that allowed us to have this mass growth, because parents would sign up and they'd be the only 7th grader. Then there'd be 5 5th graders. We went from about 20 at the end of that first year to almost 90 in a span of like 2 or 3 months. And that
So
was our
Sean,
second.
I think you'll be able to answer our first question. So Rachel wants to know and there are no silly questions tonight, moms and dads, none. That's why you're here. So please feel free to ask your questions. And you can send them to me personally if you'd prefer. So Rachel wants to know, her son is 4. Would he be able to attend full time, or is there a part-time option? And it is not a silly question.
So good question. He can do whatever you want him to do. Okay. So if you choose that he doesn't come the whole day, you can choose that. If you choose that he doesn't come every day during the week, you can choose that too. We would say that we think the full experience is really there all the time, because it's not like we follow this day-to-day repetitive routine all the time. I mean, there are things that would happen that your child would miss, that would feel, I don't know, I think that they would miss out on that. They would want to be in some of those things. I mean, it happens where we have a dance class and it happens once a week, or it happens that groups to get together and might work on a performance, and that could happen in the afternoon or it could happen in the morning. So if they miss, just know that that's a possibility, but it's your call. And I would say that with all things. There's a lot of thought sometimes that the school is supposed to impose certain types of rules on the community. Like, I have had people say, hey, can you ban certain types of snacks? Or can you make kids dress this way? Or, can you make kids do this health thing, or whatever it is? We don't do that. That's not our position. That's the parent's position. And I might feel open to give you my own feedback or recommendation about how it might impact their education. And I might be willing to suggest things, but I'm certainly not going to tell you that you can or cannot do that. We don't ban cell phones. If you don't want your kid to have a phone, you don't do it. You don't send them with one. We'll talk to them about the dangers of it, and we'll control it in certain settings, but we're just not going to play that role for the parents. So that goes into things like, if you want to travel back to Canada, if you have the grandparents visiting and you want to take time off, and you as the parent have decided that that's the best use of your child's time at that moment, I would probably agree that if the grandparents are visiting, that is more important than a day at school, and probably a lot more to learn anyways. So just as long as everybody's on the same page and we feel like you understand, if you miss certain things, you miss it. You miss Nathalie's public speaking course, you miss it. And that's the way it is. So
My best day at ISLA, I think, was the day my daughter said, I asked her what she had for lunch. And for all the Canadian parents, you're going to understand me. And she said, I had peanut butter and jam, mommy, sandwiches. I'm like, what? She said, we had peanut butter and jam sandwiches. Like, in her school in Canada, we weren't allowed to have peanut butter. Like, it was banned, right? Most schools, like, it's not permitted. So it was kind of a big aha moment. Not that it's that big a deal, but when you're so restricted. Okay, so
I can say something about that.
Yeah.
This will blow your mind, actually. This will blow your mind because we've had over 1,000 students come through here in the last 7 years, and I also was a teacher in the States. I'm aware of some of the regulations and things. We have had lots of students who come to us with various special needs and various dietary restrictions, but the percentage in comparison is like minuscule, and I mean minuscule. And I'm not sure if there's some correlation or if it's just, I don't know. I can tell you we don't have too many kids who have particular dietary restrictions. We don't have too many kids. We don't have any kids who take daily medication, like that I'm aware of, unless they're taking it before school. Because many of those issues seem to, I don't know, they seem to work themselves out once you get in the sun, maybe.
Perfect. So Sean, Desiree has a question, and then Marcy also has a question. So Desiree, go ahead.
Sure. Hi, good to meet everyone. Hi. So I do have a question about, we just put our kids in a homeschooling program here, and it was pretty strict in terms of, we're in Montreal, Quebec. There are certain competencies that had to be met, like history, French, English. So my concern, I guess, would be if we ever moved back to Canada, if things got better here by some miracle, would they be able to fall back into the school system and be caught up? And would they meet all the competencies? Like, how does that work?
It's a good question. That's a very common question that we get asked. Yeah. And so I'll say it in a couple of ways. One that might sound a bit controversial, but it'll be honest. Yeah. Your kids are not going to be the same as if they stay back in Montreal, right?
For sure.
Not going to, because we are not a Montreal preparatory school. There are international schools that will essentially pretend that they are in another place. And that is true. There are places that'll just be like, we are New York, or we are Paris, or whatever. And I find those to be absurd, actually, but mostly because you're sitting in the Dominican Republic or Germany or Saudi Arabia or wherever you are, and your child is literally learning the state capitals of the US or something like that, as though that's more important than what's happening there.
Would you be referring to the International School of Sosua? Like, is that an example of that type of structure?
That I don't want to call them out in particular or anyone else like that, but I would just say, like, I think I understand historically why 25 years ago in a town like Sosua that didn't have a school at all, and there was this kind of coming together of families, probably not much bigger than this group right here, who said, we need something or else. Like, we need something. I understand why they would build that around a particular, their thing. I mean, if we were all starting a school, we might build it around Ontario's curriculum, and it would make a lot of sense to be pretty simple. In 2022, I think location is largely irrelevant. And I think a lot of you agree, because you're starting to look at, like, being able to do your life in many ways, no matter where you're at. Having said that, we've sent lots and lots and lots of kids back to Canada, lots and lots of kids. And I'll just speak of one who was here very recently, who is in Toronto right now. And their family spent 3 years with us. They came when the children were in 4th grade and 6th grade. They had just finished in Toronto. The 6th grade girl had been a bit of an outcast back in Canada. She'd been bullied. You could tell that she was very sensitive to this. Like she was almost waiting for others to bully her. And I don't say that in a negative way, but you could see like she was trying very hard. She did 3 years here, and because of COVID, their family left during that time, couldn't get back here. They got stuck. They did their last year with us remotely last year. And then this year they jumped back in. She's in 10th grade. Academically, she's ahead of her peers. Okay, that's first and foremost, number one. Her and her brother both are ahead of their peers academically. But that's also an anecdote about her. I mean, any kid could, who knows, right? Who knows where the kid's gonna excel or go a bit slower. I'm just pointing that out. But the thing that I am more proud of is that she spent those 3 years in classrooms with children of different cultures, different languages, different ages. She was able to find her own passions. So what happened was when she went back to a 2,000 person high school, right, which is, if you can remember that feeling, somewhat terrifying, right? You remember what it feels like to try to fit in, to try to dress like everybody, maybe not get as much attention on you, maybe not even do all the things that you care about because you don't want anyone picking on you. When she got there, the thing that she had learned how to be was simply herself. And this girl who probably had some fear that when she went back to Toronto was going to be seen as different, she actually like embraced the fact that she was different. And it turns out that kids, they like that. And I mean, kids do not, I mean, kids can be brutal, you know, I mean, and especially in middle school and high school, they can be brutal. But when they see a child who's fine being silly, they're fine being nerdy, they're fine being into whatever they're into, they tend to like it. And so her parents came back and were talking to me about just how happy they were that not only had she found a lot of friends, but she found this great group of super supportive friends, and she didn't have to kind of put on any show. She's really confident. Now, to get into a little bit more detail about like levels and things like that, right? So many of the things that we use to evaluate the children are going to be right in line with a lot of the Canadian standards. We use US Common Core standards to measure things like reading, writing, and math. And though they are US Common Core standards, we largely do that because a lot of the resources that we get are tied to them, so it's just easier to use those. They are not significantly different than anything happening in Canada or the UK or any other English-speaking country. The science standards that we use to sequence our science units are from a program called Next Generation Science Standards. They're used all over the world and lots and lots of the states in the US, the most states of any. And for social studies, we use a program. This is going to be quite different than something like you would get in Canada. But in social studies, we use a program called Project Arrow, which stands for American Education Reaches Out. And we really just use it as a bit of a backbone. But what happens is in the US, where I'm from, there is very American-centric content, you know, built into the social studies book. So the students are expected to remember certain dates, figures, facts related to just Americans, really. You know what I mean? How many Americans can't even name the provinces of Canada? So they learn this, but what American Education Reaches Out did, it was built by a State Department years ago for international schools abroad that had lots of students from the States. And so they recognized that if you had a unit on innovation, you did not necessarily need to study Eli Whitney. You could study innovation from some of the founders, from some of the innovators in that particular culture. If you're in Germany, if you're in Japan, you can study innovation there. So the standards are written less about like who was Eli Whitney and talk about his significance, and more like how does innovation impact society? So when you look at science, and this gets a little bit jargony, so I don't want to bore anybody, but when you look at science and social studies standards, they are typically built in these blocks, K through 2, 3 through 5, 6 through 8, 9 through 12. So when your child is in some space of 3rd through 5th grade, we are likely going to hit a unit that hits every single one of those major standard areas. Now, does that mean if you come 1 year and we do gravity when your child's with us, and the next year you go back, that your school is not doing gravity the grade after us? It's very possible. Those are things that happen. Are we teaching Canadian history on the same level as Canada? No, but we do not shy away from Canada. We just, but we're not. So if you felt like your child was going back and they were going to fall behind on that, you certainly could do it. We never really have issues with that, largely because kids don't really need to know facts to go any other place in the world. They need to know skills. So your child, when they go back to Canada, or if you move to France or Australia or anywhere, they're going to be placed in a setting where they're going to learn new information no matter what. And as long as they have the skills to research, the skills to read, the skills to analyze, they'll be able to pick up these bigger conceptual themes.
I know,
By the way, let me
Desiree.
ask you a question. Desiree, one more quick question. Who is Isun Shin?
Who the hell knows? No idea.
Every single elementary student in the country of South Korea would absolutely be able to answer that question. Okay, that does not make them
Of course.
ahead of you.
Of course,
Okay.
of course. I get it.
Being able to do that. They would, if you come in and say you don't know, they would say that. Now, Isun Shin was one of the nation's heroes, like many countries have theirs. So conceptually, when we're talking about a unit at ISLA, we're not studying Isun Shin as though that's the concept that the kids need to understand. We're
Right.
studying what unites nations under certain stories, who are the types of heroes. And if a student wants to go into South Korea's history, great. And if they want to go somewhere else, they could go that way too.
I know, Desiree, I did this, I did ask this question before we left last year to a high school teacher that I was working with. And she basically said, if the kids are going back, and I see other questions coming in, so we're going to get those out, like before grade 6, chances are not much. It's the high school years that they would probably get tested to see what level they're at. So that's something you might want to just inquire with the school board or the school that is closest to you. But that was the answer that I got. So for now, I'm not so worried. Okay, Sean, Marcy has a question for you. She wants you to walk through a day in the classroom. She understands that every day may be a little different, but just curious to know what a day looks like. And then Dagama also has a couple of questions for you. And Marcy also asked, what is the registration process? So go ahead. Oops.
Later. We're good, Natalie.
I'm back.
The family of Marcy was
happened.
able to share their story, share their question. So I'm
go ahead.
We do loose drop off between 8 and 8:30. At 8:30, classes start. If a student comes before 8:30, they're welcome to join and do lots of different things. There's a lot of sports going on in the morning, but there's also academics and activities if they want them in the classroom. At 8:30, we start with a morning meeting. That is something where the entire group, depending on the class, but that entire group gets a preview of the day. And then I don't know which age group you want me to discuss specifically. I could do kind of both areas, but there's a significant difference between a typical day in preschool versus high school.
We have a 5-year-old. A 6-year-old by the time will be in the DR.
Okay, so they're starting with a morning meeting, right? And then that morning meeting is not only a preview of what they're doing, but also, depending on the day, a bit of a connection to their daily focus. So to explain a day, you also kind of have to explain the 6-week unit cycle. All of our students, no matter what, even if they're in preschool or in high school, are following the same 6-week cycle of inquiry, okay? So in the first week of that cycle, we call that the hook, and we are trying to inspire, create relevance about that unit's theme, get kids motivated, get kids excited, find out what they already know and what they want to know. So a lot of times our morning meetings can be connected to that theme in week 1. In week 2, 3, and 4, each of those weeks, we focus on something called an essential question. So they are a different way to focus on the unit theme. There's a particular, like, they might be perspective, it might be connection, it might be function. And so we find a way to drive a question that goes towards that theme. And so again, during those weeks, a lot of our morning meetings might also include Socratic discussions or questions or games connected to that particular question. In weeks 5, we are focused on our project development, and each student is building their own particular project, though sometimes 5- and 6-year-olds, particularly in the beginning stages of their education, are doing collaborative class projects when they're doing the big one, because it's developmentally, it's easier to guide them when we're kind of we're at such an infant stage of project development. In week 6, we are doing revision of our final project and then demonstration, which happens on presentation day. And then we do something called reflection and celebration. So those themes really connect to how we start our day. Once we start a day in a class of anywhere from, I mean, there could be between 12 and there's 45 upstairs in what we call the jungle. Now that's not a classroom, but that is a multitude of classrooms. Those students are in groups. In the beginning of the year, we evaluate students in reading, writing, math, and Spanish. And we place these students in groups, kind of thematically built around the name of their class setting. So the jungle, the groups are animals. We have the rancho. And then we do direct instruction in math and reading and writing and those things that are very fundamental skills where kids have to do one thing after the other. You really can't just skip skills in reading. We lead small groups. So our teachers are teaching those concepts to students of 5 or less, or groups of 5 or less students. The other students, while that's happening, are moving through the classroom, not unlike a Montessori classroom, if you've seen it. That makes a lot of sense to some people if you've seen it, which is that there is a lot of choice, there are activities, there are projects happening, and the students have free choice to move around. They will have to go at certain times to their math group, at certain times to their reading group, and other things like that. So they'll go to those, but other times they're working on skills. Often those skills are also related to the unit theme. During a traditional day, you probably are going to do pullouts for things like Spanish or art or music. It could be cooking or dance or any of those kind of pullouts. And so small groups of students will go to those classes as well. And meanwhile, other kids might hang back for more direct instruction. Then we'll break up our morning at around, I think they break it up at like 10 o'clock in the elementary group to do a recess and a snack. So the students snack together. It's always a fresh fruit of some kind. Then they do a lengthy recess. They get all their running out, and then they come back for a bit more of the same from before, unless they're doing some special. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds take lunch at around 11:30. They have an hour break for that. So they eat family style as a group together, and then they have free play for a significant amount of time. And then the afternoons generally, because we find energy level is a bit different and focus is a bit different, we try to squeeze more of the less academically focused stuff there. So if we're going to do art classes, we're likely to do it there. If we're going to do swimming, we're more likely to do it there. We have gardening, we have a beach that we go to, and we'll do all those things, but we'll try to like squeeze those in the afternoon. At 3 o'clock is dismissal. I would say while everyone's here, there are buses that will pick up and take children, but I have found that if you're coming to pick your child up every day or dropping them off, we're open. You can walk your kid right into the school. You can walk right into the classroom. I think you're going to have a lot more, your child's going to have a lot more success because you and the teacher are going to see each other every day. You're going to be able to speak to each other every day. You're going to get a nice little thing that happens all the time. You meet a lot of other parents too, and it's just a nice you feel probably a lot more connected to that cycle of what the kid's going through. When they go home at 3, if they do, they don't have to, they could stay after school for some of our after school activities. There's dance classes and art classes. There's a soccer team and there's a basketball team that's starting up right now. There's a normal after school program that's just kind of general. But they can stay for those up to till 5 o'clock, or they can go home. We don't generally give what you might call homework, though we do have a teacher who sends things home called Home Fun. And we do encourage students to read when they're at home. We encourage families to read with their children. We do give our families access to a reading and a math program that you could work on pretty easily. You don't need a lot of instruction to let your kid get more practice if you want. Kids, of course, going to benefit if they do a lot of it. And then the other thing to know is if your child, like Nathalie's child, finds a project that they're super into, they're going to want to do it at home because that's their thing. So that's the day in the life, if that makes any sense.
So thanks, Sean. And it's very accurate. Oh, okay, I'm drink. Yeah, I sip. Okay, so Dagama wants to know, and you already answered a few of the questions, but do we have a gym, pool, art class, and music class facilities?
Okay, a gym. I don't know if I could say we have a gym.
We have outdoors.
We have, yeah, I mean, we're outside. So we have a beach, a basketball court, a volleyball court, a soccer court. We're out. I mean, we're literally outdoors at all times. Even our indoors, we're outdoors. And that might not make sense to you, but like our classrooms are outside, they're balconies, essentially. Some of our classrooms are literally open air. Excuse me.
I will put a link after to my YouTube channel where I actually do a tour of the school with Adele, my daughter. So her perspective, and we kind of snake through the whole school. So it'll give you a perspective on what the school looks like.
But we do have a pool, we do have the beach, and we do have music class and art class. Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. Marcy is asking, I'm sure this is a question for everybody. The registration process, lead time, and cost.
Okay.
You okay?
I'm not sick. Yeah.
You are not.
Okay. So on our website, there is a register now tab. There's an admissions tab on ISLAacademy.com. And you can complete a registration form right there. So you complete that form right there. We get that. Typically takes us 24 to 48 hours to get back to you. And someone will contact you and schedule an interview. Sometimes people have already done that before they've actually registered. That's super common. If you just pass through the campus, you ask to do a tour before then, maybe we don't need to do that. But then we schedule an interview. If your child's younger, the interview is more of a tour. Let your kid come through, make sure that they feel good in the space. We recommend them coming when other kids are there, that type of thing. If your kid's a bit older, I like to meet with them personally. I think it's super important that they know me well, that our first interaction is positive and good. And we don't do testing or anything to get in. So it's not as though your English level, your math level needs to be anywhere. The only thing we actually test for is your interest in coming. We want all of our students to want to be there. And so one of the required things that you have to do if your child's 7 or up is to submit an essay. It doesn't actually have to be an essay, but submit something that states why you want to come to the school. Now, we don't grade that or anything. I'm not using that to figure out what your kid's writing level is. It's more about putting them in the mindset of wanting to be there. We feel that it's pretty important if you're going to have a lot of freedom in the school, if you're going to have a lot of choice in the school, that you don't really have kids that you're having to chase around and like cheer up because they hate it. So we always tell them there's plenty of plenty of places to go that you can also hate. You know, you don't have to be here. So that's that. The registration process, there are links under that under that admissions tab that lists things like the cost structure. It's pretty similar no matter what the grade is, but it's a little bit, it's progressive a little bit from younger to a little bit more expensive in the excuse me, in the older grades. We ask you to pay a registration fee. Wow. But if that registration fee is paid as part of a semester or a year in advance payment, you get that added to the cost, credited to the cost of your tuition. If that makes sense. The registration fee is equivalent, equivalent to approximately 1 month's tuition. And the most loose payment plan that you can do is to pay your year's tuition over the course of 10 monthly payments. If that makes sense.
Perfect. Okay, so Desiree is at, oh, Beata, you put your hand up. Go ahead. Desiree, you're next.
Hi, hello everyone. So I saw on a website there are two tuitions, two sets. So you have two campuses, correct? Can you talk
Correct.
a little bit how they're different? I'm sorry if I missed it. It was in the beginning. I was a couple of minutes late. So how they different and see the pricing is also different. So we have 4-year-old and 10-year-old.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so the Cabarete campus will be on its 8th year next year, number 8.
Mm-hmm.
And our Las Terrenas campus will be on its 4th year. So it's on its 3rd year this year. And the first two of them were, you know, pandemic impacted in some way or another, you know. When we started the campus in Cabarete, the part of the reason for the difference in price is that we had to build, we had to build everything up. We had, how do I say this? The cost of running from preschool to 12th grade was very, very significant. And to be able to attract teachers that would be willing to put down roots in our Cabarete campus was critical for us. And all of the infrastructure and all those needs. After our 4th year in Cabarete, a group of families came to us from Las Terrenas and asked us to go there. Las Terrenas is in many ways very similar to Cabarete. There's a lot of similarities, super diverse, beach town, a lot of surfing, and you know, it's really cool, but it's not quite as big. It's a little bit smaller, a little bit, and just a couple years behind, if that makes any sense. It's just some of the infrastructure is not there. There were no other schools of any, well, there's a French school there, but there were no other like English language schools going on in Las Terrenas. And so there was not even a high school there, which was one of the main problems with the community, was that if you thought about buying a property there or starting a business there, you really couldn't do it because you knew at 14 your child needed to go somewhere else for high school. So we didn't feel like we could come in with the same price structure in Las Terrenas when there wasn't even anything else in the market. And but we've slowly inched up over the last couple of years. The other thing to remember is that our Cabarete campus, it started at a relatively low rate as well, with just a couple teachers. And our Las Terrenas campus started with just a couple teachers. Believe it or not, on August 10th, 2019, I received the keys to a property that was essentially underwater and completely destroyed. And on September 2nd of that year, we opened a school from pre-K to 12th grade with only 3 teachers. So we had 3 classes from 4 to 17. And we were able to piece together a culture there that's now up to 80 kids. And the tuition is still significantly lower, and it's probably going to always remain a little bit lower until, I don't know, maybe 10 years from now, maybe it'll be a bit different story. But at the moment, that's the case. In terms of the similarities or differences between the campuses, there's about 80 kids there versus about 145 in Cabarete. Our Cabarete campus is a tad bit bigger, but both campuses are right near the beach. Both campuses have huge gardens, shaded outdoor classrooms. We do the same calendar, the same schedule. We run the same curriculum. We do presentation days. We train all our teachers the same. I'm the director at both campuses. Our curriculum development team in elementary, humanities, and STEM both oversee both campuses. All the furniture, we trade back and forth. The libraries, we trade back and forth. The social media is done by the same. So there's a lot of similarities. It's quite a good deal there in Las Terrenas, actually. And some people say it's more expensive to live there. There's maybe some truth to that. So maybe there's also a bit, maybe that helps that school is, we give a bit of a discount for families that are moving there.
Okay, thank you. And as far as Spanish, is it part of the curriculum, or this is purely English based?
Yeah, so all of our teachers are bilingual, number one, but our primary language of instruction is in English. So we teach our classes in English. However, we have Spanish classes. In our primary years, which is up through like first grade, all of the classes have a teacher in the room who doesn't even speak English.
Mm-hmm.
So the students have to communicate with that student in Spanish. One of the biggest differences between us and other schools in the Dominican Republic is that the Dominican Republic's Ministry of Education requires schools affiliated with them, of which we are not. We're one of the few that are not. It requires schools to follow a specific Spanish curriculum. And that might sound like a good idea, but actually what it means is that schools essentially put all students, first language Spanish speakers or brand new to Spanish, in the same classroom and have them do the same thing. We do not do that. We have an intermediate class. We have a beginner's class. We teach our Spanish in the same way that we would teach literature or math, which is to be based on ability. We have great Spanish teachers who come in. And then the other thing that's important to know, we have students in our classrooms who do not speak English, like a lot of them. We have students, and frankly, we have students who don't speak English or Spanish, which is a bigger challenge. So these students our playground is not just English happening. It's not just Spanish happening. It's everything. I hear German, I hear Russian, I hear Italian, I hear French every day. So it's this wonderful place for kids to be able to, I think one of the big like thoughts, maybe not for a 5-year-old, but maybe your older child, is to say like, what will it be like when I move there? I don't speak the language. No one's going to talk to me. That's not true at all. It's just not, it's a totally opposite of how it actually feels. Our campus is filled with people just like yourself who got here a year ago, 2 years ago. And so even people who aren't great English speakers, they are more than comfortable communicating. There's something about it here where people, they don't let language be a barrier in terms of relationships. And that's one of the reasons I think people like Cabarete and Sosua so much, is that, yeah, you can get by without Spanish, actually. You can survive, but also you feel a little bit more emboldened to try your Spanish because you don't feel like such an outsider. It's just this big mix.
Okay, so you said that there is Spanish on a daily basis, or it's just like once or twice a week there's a Spanish class? How, it's like,
yeah, they're going to Spanish class. They're doing pull-out Spanish classes as well as the integration in the class. Okay, so they are going to Spanish class.
Okay.
Multiple times per week, but also immersed. Sometimes people, for example, I imagine this happens in Canada quite a lot, is that you might choose to put your child in a French immersion school. where no one will speak English to them and everything is in French. And we don't take that same approach in English or in Spanish. We would never refuse to communicate with a kid, work it out, because we don't really believe in the concept of like making someone feel pain to get to learning. I see students all the time who learn these languages. They learn it quickly or they learn it slowly, but if they're here long enough, they all pick up the language and pick it up quite well. In the high school level, if your child goes here, it's almost guaranteed while they're in high school that they'll be able to pass at least one of the advanced placement Spanish language exams. So there are 2 advanced placement Spanish exams. One is Spanish language and one is Spanish literature. The Spanish language, all of our students can pass before graduating, which indicates that they're at a university level of Spanish, but of course that's a university level for someone speaking Spanish as a second language. Spanish literature one it's a tough one even for native Spanish speakers, but we do have some students who pass that one as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for those questions, Beata. Okay, so Desiree wants to know, Sean, does ISLA teach subjects that are not taught in regular schools, like managing finances, nutrition, emotional regulation, the things that matter?
Hey,
I can say yes, Desiree, yes.
so, I mean, to all of those, I can say yes, actually. So the concept of, how was it worded? Classes or subjects?
Subjects. Does ISLA teach subjects that are not taught in regular schools?
The concept of subjects is what I'd like to address. So what are they, right? Like it's a factory model of education to assume that learning about one particular thing is how it works, that you only do science and you only do this particular thing. The truth is that everything's integrated. So nutrition is going to be a major part of a health course, of course, but I mean, we're doing largely vegetarian meals grown by students in our garden. So it's a big topic. We're doing athletics and sports that are connecting to nutrition. It's a very fit community. We're doing units that connect to that theme of nutrition, but we are not going to a nutrition class as though it's not connected to the rest of it. For personal finance, however, our students are required to have a semester's credit for that. And so we have what we typically do, besides having it be a regular thing that we do every 2 years in the high school with students, one of the final projects that our seniors have to do before they graduate is create personal budget for their next year of life in university. And in learning things about economics and personal finance, you'll find that there's a large number, having taught this subject here, there are a large number of incredible programs that will guide students to independent learning. So I'll just give you an example. Last year, our students created their own demo accounts for cryptocurrency. They created their own demo accounts for stock markets. Our students learned about how to produce and sell NFTs. They've learned about macroeconomics and microeconomics. They have created personal budgets. They learned about minimum wage laws around the world. They learned about how to do compound interest in math. I mean, many of those things that are connected to real relevant things in their life. The other topic was, what was it? Emotional regulation?
Yeah.
So
emotional regulation, yeah.
Yeah, right. So in addition to regular yoga classes that our students do, we also do morning mindfulness and morning meditations regularly. It's optional, but those are some of the types of things that happen before 8:30. We have a couple different people that come in and lead those with us. Our staff are all trained in nonviolent communication, and we've been implementing that in our classrooms. I just participated in a workshop on Friday, actually, about it, and that was our 3rd workshop of the year. So it's a big deal for us because something that I'm really learning as we've built this school is that, like, okay, in the 21st century, when you have in your pocket a computer that can access every book, film, work of art, speech that has ever existed in history, you have the ability to access information. And it used to be that school was a place where you could go get that information. The teacher would give you some of that if you listened and sat still. But now you do have access to that at any time. And so what we have to have as a teacher in the classroom is a person that is helping to inspire the students to want to go get that. And so having said that, pedagogy and expert knowledge of some particular science or history concept, to me, is far outweighed by a person who connects with a student's heart. We are looking for teachers that are not, to make an analogy, they're not the guitarist in front of the room playing their own songs, but they are the DJ that is paying attention to the people in the room and moving the song faster or slower based on the vibe of the kids. And they know what the kids need because they know the kids. You can't do that if your whole focus is on just delivering the content, but you have to really kind of connect to what's here. And we have several teachers in our high school level who are also actually therapists. And that's also my background. And one of the reasons that I think we've all become attracted to each other is like, we always were doing things with students. We were always were with kids, and we were always finding like inspiration in seeing kids find their own path. And we recognize that a lot of times what's holding a 14-year-old back is not their inability to do a math problem. It's really not that at all. It's something totally different. And once you connect that, once you help a kid find the solution to that, then they are capable of doing those challenging math problems. And if you're not addressing that, then you're kind of just dragging that kid through adolescence, assuming that these minuscule benchmarks or unimportant benchmarks are going to lead them to success, but it's not going to unless they understand who they are and what they want. Thank you.
Great.
So next question is, we talked about after school activities before, so parents would like to know if there are any fees linked to those after school activities.
There are, but they're pretty small. So
Dance was
$4
probably
a day or
the one that surprised me the most. So Adele was in a dance class for 8 weeks. She danced twice a week for an hour, and it was $40. So
yeah,
it was pretty
so
reasonable.
After school programs, after school programs, my deal with the after school programs, to be transparent with you, is that I encourage all of our teachers to do them, but I don't take any cut from it. And so what will happen is that we have, a lot of times these programs can be run by our assistant teachers or even younger teachers who have a little bit less experience and maybe aren't earning the same level of salary as some of the others. And so they have a bit more energy, a bit more time, and they want to do these different things. And the young lady who's leading the dance, she comes to me and says, I'd like to do it. What do you think the going rate is? And I'll share that. I mean, if you're going to do one-on-one tutoring for calculus, you know, you might pay more for that. You get one-on-one piano lessons or something, maybe. But one of the reasons Adele's dance class is so cheap is that it's not meant for one. It's meant for like 15 kids at the same time. So that teacher's doing pretty well, actually, even though it's $4 a class or something. I think you could expect more like $5 to $10 for an after school program. But again, it could be 20 if there's some sort of specialization or something.
Yeah. Does anybody have any other questions? Because I think I've run through them all, that what was in the chat. Does anybody else have anything to ask? How about the food? Beata wants to know about the food, Sean.
A great question. Well, so we have a chef that comes in, okay? And you can see a menu on our website to get a sample of it, but we have a chef who comes in, and Well, okay. When we started the school, we were very small. We had one person doing the cooking and the cleaning, believe it or not. And she was a great cook for like 8 people, but not when we got up to like 80. You know, it was a different story. And I had just forgotten at that point. I was just so buried with other things, like how important the food is to your day, like what you eat, right? And how much it makes you feel like essentially royalty when you're eating good food. You know, what an impact that can have on your day to eat fresh, good, delicious food. So we brought in this chef, you know, first as like just a trial, and then it was just game changing for everything, the vibe and everything there. And she stayed with us. I think she's been with us for 5 years now. And throughout that time, we've had, I would say, a lot of give and take and experimentation, because on the one hand, I want her to try like exotic things. I do want the kids to like be exposed to new things. But then on the other hand, I do want them to eat. So we play around with it, you know, and we're not afraid to say, like, sometimes we will mix in new ingredients in a maybe non-healthy way just to get them over the hump. But we do like vegetarian lasagna. We do a pizza day. We do a taco day. We do a couple days every fortnight or so that are related to local cuisine. We don't do a lot of meat. And I've bent like a lot over the last few years because we were vegetarian like exclusively for a while. But our high school students put together a strong pitch to me about why we should compromise on that. And so over the time, we have slowly done a few things. So there's probably 30% of the days where you have access to some sort of a meat product, and whether it's fish or something like that, typically. And then for snack for our preschool and kindergarten students, it's almost always a fresh fruit, something locally sourced. We eat avocado, we eat pineapple. There's always a green salad. There's always a fresh fruit. There's always a main, and then there's always some form of like a starch, I guess, a pasta or white rice or something of that nature. And then we'll do big events. We'll celebrate, like when there's a traditional holiday coming up, we'll do something big on that end. You can see some cool photos of our food on our Instagram page. Someone asked a question about the calendar, the academic calendar. Our school
Just
year,
asking about start dates for school.
yeah, our school year always starts on the last Monday of August. We just like settled into that pocket, and generally ends mid-June. We take a fall break after our first 7 weeks of school. Our first unit is not 6 weeks, it's 7 weeks, because we need a bit of an orientation there for students. And then we take a 1 week fall break in October. We take 3 weeks around the winter holidays. And then we take a 1 week holiday leading up to Easter. Now that is just a Dominican standard here, that they call it Semana Santa or Holy Week here, and everyone takes that week. We do not celebrate, at least in terms of closing school, any non-Dominican holidays. So like, it's not like we're closed on Canadian Thanksgiving or anything, but if you want to celebrate that, you go do that on your own and just let us know. But we are closed on Dominican national holidays to respect our local staff. And then during the summer, we finished this year, I think our last day is June 15th. We take a week and a half off because that's midweek. We take a week and a half off, and then we start summer camp that goes for another month or 6 weeks or so. So we're pretty much always going. We take those little breaks to do construction and other things like that. You know, there's a question about religion. Could you read that to me, Nathalie?
So Desiree's asking if there's any specific religion taught. How about sex ed curriculum in the US that is questionable?
Okay, good. No, we're not a religious school. We have units that like talk about the history of various religions, but we don't have any particular religion. There's no moment of silence or prayer or anything like that. We have kids of different, all over the place. So we respect it all in that case. But we do, I mean, a lot of our high school students elect to take advanced placement courses for things like world history, and there's a lot of content. World history is connected to religion in a lot of ways, so there's a lot of study on it in there, but it's not as though we are reading something out of Proverbs or anything like that. Though we respect it, do your thing, and again, if you want to celebrate a religious holiday, feel free. Sex ed, so yes we do. So there's actually a great set. I would recommend all parents to look at this. You'd be pleasantly surprised. There's a thing called the National Sex Education Standards, and what we typically think of as like sex education versus what the standards are, particularly as it relates to younger children, you might be shocked. Actually, it's not. It's not. There's in the older years, yes, there's some conversations and standards that are related to some of those things. But as a 5-year-old, for example, there are standards about what it means to be a friend and what it means to have like healthy relationships, and how that you can see, if you're familiar at all with ever looking at like reading standards or math, you can see how that particular concept builds up to like dating, which you might discuss in 10th grade or something like that. There is, you might talk about anatomy and reproduction with an 8-year-old, but you might do it on things like, you might discuss how animals are recreated. So there's a lot of ways to go about it where it's not so, whatever. However, I would say we're in constant communication with families. Our teachers keep private Facebook groups where they're posting like their theme of the week. They're doing weekly letters. If they were to do a topic that they're not sure if people would be open to, if we're going to watch a film or something like that, they generally are going to communicate that to you in some way. And if you don't feel comfortable with it, you could talk about it. We haven't had anything really like that. It's pretty. I don't know if you've ever felt that, Nathalie, as a parent, if we've ever like gotten into something. I mean, I think sometimes there are families. It's more like our 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds. There can be parents of kids that age who maybe aren't sure that their child is actually 13. Like they still think they're 10, but they're 13. And so that does happen. And, and they want to talk about whether or not their child's having these conversations. And we'll say like, we're there in the room. We know that we're addressing these topics because we're hearing it, like they're being discussed. And then controversial topics, I'd be happy to address that. I think the debate, particularly in the US, about what the topics are, I find it to be, I don't want to call it hilarious, maybe sad would be the right one. So as I see it as an American educator, people are debating which history facts to speak about, which literature to read in class. And the argument is assuming that if the school chooses one versus the other, that means something significant. But the truth is, the children already have it all. They already have the ability to access all those books, all those facts, all those websites. Just because the teacher is teaching these things here does not mean that these are not available to the kid. We should not be teaching a specific set of facts. We should be teaching students skills. And if we're teaching students skills, they will be able to read through BS when they see it. They will be able to critically discern if what they're reading seems false. And they'll be able to have open discussions with their parents about things that are controversial. And I think the conversation that's happening in the US is a 20th century debate. The kids literally go, like, as soon as someone points out, a parent school board in some place in Kansas points out a book that they think is controversial, that book trends on TikTok, and these kids hear all about it. And that's life, right? We are not going to be able to close off the wild west of the internet to these children, but what we can do is be honest with them about how to like accurately figure out if sources are real and how to read through things that are not.
Excellent. So we are at 8:35 now, and I'm wondering if there's any last questions. Otherwise, I'm gonna stop the recording and end the meeting. Sean I know is always available for more questions, but this I will repost. So if you need to re-listen to it, you will be able to. You're welcome, Desiree. It's our pleasure putting this together. Thanks to you, Sean, for being here and taking time to meet everybody and answer their questions. When you do head down, make sure you go visit the school. Let me know when you come down so we can take you on over. Any last words from anybody? No? Sean, any last words? Brad?
I just wanted to say thank you very much for sharing your time tonight, Sean. You like really explained school super well. My wife was listening the whole time, and my 15-year-old daughter, and just gave more confidence for our decision, what we're doing, and it's a good plan and a good school to be going to. So it's very exciting, very exciting.
Thanks.
Excellent.
Thanks. I would say this. I want to say something real quick because we have thank you, Brad. Like now that we're a little bit older, we have these we have some students that are adults now, you know, and you meet them, and it's so nice to see them flourishing and doing well. And sometimes you'll get really nice words, right? Like from a parent or from the man or woman themselves, the former student. And I really don't think that the magic that we're doing, I don't think that we're doing anything. It's a bit like my beard. People will come and go how did you do that? And my answer is, I literally didn't do anything. That's how it got this way. And I think with education, it's not about doing anything. It's like pulling back a bit and giving the kid a little bit more space to figure out who they are. And it turns out most of them can do it if they're given a safe space to be creative and take risks with who they are. So it means that type of education is not a quick fix type of education. And that's something that I want to be clear of as we're building this community here. And I think one of the coolest things about ISLA is that there's this large amount of people that have these shared values. And one of the things that I believe is shared is that we're not trying to measure, young Johnny or Sally by what they did from 6 weeks to the next. I mean, we are measuring it, but we're not placing our value on that. We are literally going, we believe in you to find your time at your own pace. We know that when you're ready, it's going to come. And while we are not the type of school that lets kids just do nothing, I mean, there are schools worldwide where you can choose that type of kind of approach. We're not that, but we do take as loose of an approach as we can and try to make sure that when kids are here that they're really we're being very thoughtful about expressing the relevance of what they're doing and then letting them kind of make that choice. Most kids do not choose to not express themselves creatively over a long period of time. They ultimately will become inspired by their classmates, but it's not only about what a teacher is doing, it's about the culture there. And so our families are a big part of that, of a shared thing of saying, we get it. We know that you as a child are going to find your way. And we now have, rather than just words, we now have several students who can showcase that over growing up to be these great, well-rounded kids. So I guess that's my final piece to say to everybody. If you want to join the community, just know I think we all share this idea that it's an open-minded, risk-taking community of people who left their home country often to try something new. A lot of the parents are entrepreneurs like Nathalie, or they're doing something super unique. They're maybe a little bit different, and that fosters this whole kind of like innovation in the kids too. We don't have a factory in town where the kids are like preparing to go to the mill. You know, they are looking around at you, they're looking around at their friends' parents, and they're seeing people who are risk takers, and they know that that's something that they want too. They're looking at people who are open-minded and accepting of other cultures, and they see that that's just a value that's shared in the community. And so parents play just as big of a role in fostering that as any teacher does. That's it. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks, everybody. I am just going to stop this.